Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast, which is sponsored by the Timeline app. Timeline is retirement income planning software that helps financial planners like me bring your retirement journey to life and answer your big retirement income questions. Now, have you ever sought financial advice? And if so, did you act on the advice given? If you didn't follow the advice you received, you're not alone. Too often, the advice is sound, well, hopefully it is, and you're eager, but for some reason, nothing happens. Neuropsychologist and financial change experts Dr Moira Somers recognized this pattern in her work and was concerned about the well-being of her clients and the lost opportunities. So she's decided to investigate further. Dr. Somers has published a book called Advice That Sticks, which examines the 5 factors that determine whether someone will follow through with financial advice, and is here to discuss her findings today. Thank you for joining me, Moira.
Thank you for having me.
So we met, didn't we? We met last week in London, which was great that you came across and you did a masterclass and then a keynote at the Humans Under Management Conference. So that was great to catch up with you and meet with you. So for those who may not have heard of you before, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you've ended up doing what you're doing?
I have the privilege of being able to do a number of different things. I'm a professor at the University of Manitoba's Department of Clinical Health Psychology. So I see patients who have varying degrees of struggle with neurological disease. And I also work with people in the area of wealth psychology, including financial advisors and their clients. And I have had a long-standing fascination with what makes it easy or hard for people to follow through with the things that they want for their life, including professional advice on what would help them lead better lives. And one of the areas where it's really hard for people to follow through with their best intentions happens to be the domain of money.
So why do you think that is?
You know, I think there are lots of reasons why. One of the problems is just that battle we all face between what feels good now and what would be best for us in the long run. And the human brain just seems to have this hardwiring for let's go for now, shall we? And anything that requires delay of gratification and putting off a certain pleasure or reward now for, especially when the trade-off is for something uncertain in the long term, that seems to be a hard thing for us to, I don't know whether it's trust or overcome, but it's definitely there. It's there in the domain of healthcare, and it's certainly there in the domain of money.
Now, I meet people, obviously around money, talk about money quite a lot. And one of the comments I hear from people is, I'm no good with money. I'm rubbish with money. It disappears so quickly. And of course, I think, sometimes when people keep telling themselves that story, then the inevitable happens.
Yeah, I sat beside somebody on a plane the other day who was going absolutely crazy because there was a delay because of ice. And he was just losing his mind. He was cursing out the pilots and the airline, and soon it generalized to the world and his fate in life. And then he stopped at one point and said, I just don't have any patience. And what it struck me at that moment was how sometimes we have these fixed beliefs that we're born with a set amount of something, whether that's patience or financial know-how, and that's just the way we are. Whereas what the reality is that we can pretty much change anything we set our mind to. So one of those 5 factors that emerges quite strongly from the research about whether or not people will follow advice is indeed their sense of self-efficacy. In other words, their belief that they can do something to affect the kind of change they want to see. If you start out by saying, I can't do this, I'm rubbish at it, then chances are it just creates a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy where you continually look for confirmatory evidence that indeed you are rotten with money, and that'll guide your behavior in some very interesting ways.
Mm. And do you think we learn some of these kind of belief systems in childhood?
Oh, the money messages are certainly there and picked up at a pre-verbal level, and often that then means that it's quite unconscious, that our beliefs about money are kind of driving the bus without our awareness of it. And often it just takes a couple of conversations with a spouse or a friend or a financial advisor to begin to surface what have been under the surface beliefs.
Absolutely. So I suppose the big question here is for those who are listening who thinking, I've got some, I haven't handled money well in my life, or, I'm finding it difficult maybe to plan for my retirement, or, money just kind of, rolls out of my pocket all the time. What are the hacks that you can provide to them? Obviously they can read your book, but what are the shortcuts that you could give some advice if you were sat next to someone on the plane and they said, Moira, how could I be more successful with money? What would your advice be to them?
Oh boy, I wish there were a really sexy kind of magic bullet that I could give, but some of it is just simply being willing for it to be different. Would you even be willing to change at that level? Could you change your belief that you can be somebody who's starting now is getting better all the time with handling your finances? Sometimes I find that people have beliefs that they're no good with money because they just aren't, there aren't as many zeros after their name as they have been led to believe is the marker of success. And so I think sometimes we have to have a pretty skeptical view of what the dominant culture's view of being good with money is. There are people who have lived in scarcity all their lives, and I have had the privilege of working with some of those people. And let me tell you, Justin, they are phenomenal money managers. There is all kinds of evidence that they are good with money, even if they don't have a lot left in their bank account at the end of the month. And so being willing to just kind of take a look at where are you good and where could you change? The world of money is quite complex, as you know, and it's not just a one-dimensional thing. So what are the factors where you actually manage money quite well? For example, do you earn well? Or are you a great comparison shopper? Or have you managed to pass on great money messages to your children about living within their means, for example? Have you got a story to tell about being willing to face up to debt you've incurred, and how the willingness to do that has begun to transform how you spend and how you save? Everybody's got something that they can build on. And I guess the next hack, if it were to be one, is just to be willing to be more conscious of how money flows in and out of your life every month. I find that once people are really able to determine how much life costs and how they want to direct the flow of that money, are those hidden subscriptions that have been coming out of their bank account or on their credit card every month, are they adding to the quality of life? That sometimes those kinds of steps begin to leave people with a greater and greater sense that they're the ones driving the bus, not these unconscious beliefs.
Yeah. Wise advice, and a bit of I suppose self-knowledge a bit of kind of introspective or reflection on where you are with money would be helpful.
Absolutely. And, I find that working with a CFP professional or an accredited financial advisor of some sort is one way of just beginning to tell the truth about your money life to somebody who's qualified to hear it.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean qualified by virtue of their insurance designation or their investment portfolio expertise, but I mean qualified by virtue of their empathy, of their ability to listen and to understand what you really want and to help you make decisions in accordance with those values. Because one of the other big factors that determines whether or not people will follow advice are behaviors of the advisors themselves. There are lots of advisors out there who don't show up in the way that one might hope. Many of them show up with so much jargon that they could leave Einstein feeling like a dummy. Some of them show up with such a pressure to talk and to impress that they never give the client a chance to put in a word in. Some of them show up with frank gender biases, so they only talk to one member of the couple if you're going in as a couple. So in my work, I spend a lot of time working not with consumers or the sort of the regular Joe public, but I spend a lot of my time working with advisors, trying simply to get them to stop doing the things that are such turnoffs or so off-putting to clients.
And I think, and I don't know what it's like in Canada and the US, but I mean, I hold the certified financial planning certificate myself, which obviously is a kind of international certification. And in the UK, we also have something called the Chartered Financial Planner, which I'm also one. But the main route of qualifications is about testing knowledge. That's the benchmark. That how and I appreciate that. Yes, you want a knowledgeable advisor, but you're touching on something deeper than this. This is about listening skills and empathy, the things you just mentioned a second. How would so if someone was out there looking for an advisor, what would again, let's say you were advising your sister in the UK, let's say you had one, and she called you up and said, Moira, I need to find a financial advisor. What would you, other than the qualification route, which of course I'm sure you'd recommend that she found a qualified person, what would you ask them what would you recommend that she was looking for, or how she found someone she could work with?
Yes, that's such a great question. One of the tried and true methods is to talk to friends about whether they're working with somebody they like and to find out why it is that they like that person. And you want to listen for comments like, he or she listens to me, he or she knows what's important to me. One time when I was struggling with X, one time when I was struggling with anxiety over what Brexit was going to do to my retirement, or one time when I was struggling over whether I should stay living in a smaller place in the city with no commute versus making a decision about moving out to the countryside with a longer commute but a lovelier home. That person helped me to make that decision. He or she really takes the time to know. So I think that kind of personal recommendation can go a long way, especially if you're similar to the person whom you're asking.
Yeah.
Then I think you really do need to have that combination of paying attention to heart and head. And one of the biggest ones is, how much time does this person spend talking during the initial interview versus listening? It's not that you're looking for a therapist. You're just looking for somebody who is skilled enough and humble enough to understand that what you want as a client is equally, has a great deal to contribute to the kinds of investments that you're going to make, to the kinds of decisions that you're going to be making together. And it really is a co-creation in that regard. So if you are picking up any signs of arrogance, any signs of judgment, any signs of attempts to use baffle gab to bamboozle you, then walk with your feet, vote with your feet, and get out of there and find somebody else.
Sure.
What do you usually recommend, Justin? Do you have ways of helping people tune into whether somebody's good for them or not?
I mean, other than the benchmarks, I do like, obviously I've taken a number of qualifications because I believed they were going to be useful to me. And once I'd achieved the certified planning certified ticket and the chartered ticket, I was then looking for the emotional side, the kind of life planning skills. And as you know, that I studied with George Kinder a lot in the Kinder Institute to understand how we can help coach people, I suppose, what is it that they want to achieve, and with some support and some guidance around money and support and guidance around what their dreams are, that you can create a fantastic client outcome. So yeah, I suppose that I spent a long time over the last 10 years, I suppose, really trying to understand the psychology around all this money issues, and meeting people like yourself and studying with you and lots of other people. So anyone who's gone down that path is studied hard to get the right qualifications, and then also invested in themselves to try and understand more about how they can really help the human being in front of them, and not just knowing one tax product over another. One of the things that's really interested me more is I know that you're a senior faculty member at the Financial Transition Institute, and of course, probably the biggest transition people make is this move into retirement. What's your experience around that?
Well, this is one of those ways in which it becomes increasingly important to pay attention to how you feel with your advisor. Because, if you're just having a once a year meeting with the guy to talk about how your portfolio's been doing, or to update her on any changes that you might have been making in your life, if that's all you're requiring an advisor to do, that's one thing. But the fact is that when we really need our advisors are those days when the feathers hit the fan, when we're going through big life transitions and we don't necessarily know what we want or whether we're going to get there or not. Sometimes those events can be welcome events and anticipated events, retirement being one of those events that often is both welcome and anticipated. But you're also looking at possibly meeting with this person when there's been a death in the family, or when there's a serious illness that's got some financial implications. And so having a sense of being understood and of being valued, and of that this person has the ability to work with you at the just right speed for you, that's really important. And if you don't pay attention to that during the relatively calm and stable times in your life, you're going to be faced with having to make a change during some of the unstable times of your life. So I think it really is important to pay attention to relationship on top of credentialing. Retirement is, you can never tell about whether an event is positive or negative without actually asking somebody how they feel about it. So for some people, retirement is something they've longed for and are just rubbing their hands in anticipation of. My husband is in that position right now. And for other people, self included, it's something that it holds no interest for me at all. So finding out, what are your listeners feeling and experiencing? What have been the surprises for them, and what do they wish they'd known ahead of time, or what are they hoping that they can know before they get there? Those would be the kinds of questions I'd be interested in asking them and hearing from them.
Yeah, and of course, there's many more transitions, as you say, once you are retired. I mean, you may transition into voluntary work. You may have some more paid work. You often will, at some point, if you're a couple, there will be a death of a partner. It's inevitable. There will be a decline in health. I mean, there's a whole heap of stuff going on, isn't there?
There is. And some of those transitions, as I said, they may be welcomed or they may not be welcomed. But what tends to happen in retirement is that they kind of pile up on one another, and that's one of the particular and peculiar challenges of aging, is that sometimes just when you think you found your feet, another wave comes and knocks you off them again. So I think that one of the key things that we need to develop as we age is a kind of emotional agility, and that requires that we really build our resilience in ways that are both physical and cognitive, and I guess beyond just those two domains, even emotional and social and relational. That age and retirement, as we get out of the normal routines, it can have a tendency to kind of shrink the circle around us. So life can become much smaller without you even necessarily being aware of it at the time. Mm-hmm. And as a health problem hits, the circle tightens a little bit more. And if you move to a community where you don't know too many people, it tightens all that more. And so we really have to kind of kick at the boundaries of that circle to make sure that we are not participating in our own decline. As a neuropsychologist, that's something that I'm constantly on the lookout for in my patients. Are they doing the things that are setting them up for healthy aging, or are they kind of submitting to a life that's getting smaller and smaller without their permission?
Yeah, and how do you encourage them to take action if you see that happening?
I think there's a combination of things. We need to be looking for activities that challenge us. And sometimes as you get older, you're just kind of less impatient with being a beginner about something. You're kind of used to being cock of the walk and to having skills. And very few of us really enjoy being back in that beginner's place again. We don't like things where we don't know the outcome necessarily. We don't like things where it's not certain whether we'll be any good at it or not. And yet, the research shows that if you just stick to the tried and true, you are inviting actual brain shrinkage. You are inviting neurological decline to sit in. That we have to keep finding ways to wake up our brain. And the best ways to do that are by looking to activities that train our attention in new ways. So let's take maybe a tried and true skill. Maybe you've been playing guitar or piano for years, and you can just pick up a song that you've known, and it just gives you great pleasure to sit down and play that. Well, that pleasure thing is important to pay attention to, because without positivity in life, we also tend to experience cognitive decline. But the familiarity of that really doesn't do anything for our brain health. If you really want to wake up your brain, go sign up for some improvisational jazz lessons. You know, it's got to kind of push you into that stretch zone, or do some ear training. Or, you know, if you've only ever played music by reading music, then get yourself a teacher who can challenge you to play more by ear. Or if you've only ever played by ear, let's see if we can get you to learn how to read sheet music. So it's just taking the things that already give you joy and kind of expanding that outward so that it's a little more challenging. One of the things that I often hear couples in retirement say is that, you know, this becomes the opportunity. I put that in quotes because it doesn't often feel quite so grand as all that, but, you know, to take up ballroom dancing together, or those things that one of you has always wanted to do and the other one is maybe a little more reluctant about it. Take those invitations as opportunities to grow your relationship, which, you know, that's something that can get stale, as an opportunity to stretch your physical muscles, which are something that can get stale in their own way. They shrink and they tighten, and that get new neurological pathways firing up. You know, if you take ballroom dancing lessons, let me tell you, your brain will come alive. Memory, motor areas, the cerebellum, which is responsible for sort of coordinating these movements, it will come alive. And in the end, it prevents the kind of decline that we're all hoping to avoid, or at least compress into the smallest possible period at the end of our lives. That's the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, as we get older, does kind of dealing with finances, does that become, what do you think? Does it become more complex, more difficult? You know, or do you feel that people are burdened by money as they get older?
You know, I think retirement encompasses, you know, 3 to 4 decades for some people. So we're talking about really different cognitive abilities and really different life circumstances from somebody who might be 55 versus 95. Yeah. So we just need to look at that. So for today's totally depressing statistic, I will share with you the results of a Harvard Business Review study, which says that financial competency tends to peak at around age 53. Wow. And then goes down from there. But what they were looking at there is, you know, an ability to calculate interest rates, or to know, just it was almost like financial literacy. Right. But that's just an average, and we participate in our own decline, as I just mentioned to you. So you can choose not to participate in that decline by staying actively involved in your own finances, by staying aware. At some point, it's a really good idea to pay attention to how aging affects us all, memory being one of them. So if you can automate your bill payments rather than relying on yourself to be cued to pay stuff, then you should do that. Another really healthy thing to do as you age is to consider who it is that you would like to invite to help you with your financial management. We know that elderly people are more likely to be victims of fraud, and you know, the unscrupulous kind of expertise in unscrupulousness seems to be growing all the time, and creativity in that domain. So the way that people can get sucked in is really quite extraordinary. And so just having a commitment from someone that you know and trust to meet with you on occasion, to sit down and say, so let's take a look at the bank accounts, or let's take a look at the investment accounts, and see where they're going. That's a really important way to safeguard your own financial well-being in retirement.
Yeah, yeah, wise advice. Thank you so much for joining me today, Moira, all the way from Canada. It's been absolutely fascinating chatting to you. Where could people find out more about you and the great work that you do?
My website is moneymindandmeaning.com, and I would be delighted to connect with people through that if they would like to learn more. I also have the book, which is more for an advisor audience than a general public, but it's called Advice That Sticks.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I know people can find you on Twitter as well. So what we will do, we'll put all the information about Dr. Moira Somers, her book and the work she does on the show notes at our website, retirementcafe.co.uk, and all the useful links we mentioned. If you enjoyed this episode, please do leave a review on iTunes by searching for the Retirement Cafe podcast and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. Once again, thank you to our sponsors, the Timeline app, where we'll put information about that wonderful software that financial planners can use. And once again, thank you, Dr. Moira Somers.
Thank you. Take good care.